So welcome to the Global Network webinars. My name is Alexander Loschke, and I'm moderating today together with my colleague Sean Lovell. We have with us Yongyi Min, Heather Page, Daniel Eshetie, and Sokunpanha You from the UN Statistics Division, who will share data and insights from the Sustainable Development Report 2024. Using the latest available data and estimates, the Sustainable Development Goals report details the significant challenges the world is facing in making progress towards achieving the SDGs. The analysis features areas with setbacks while also showcasing where progress has been made. The report also highlights where action must accelerate. The SDG report is prepared by the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, better known as DESA, in collaboration with the entire UN statistical system consisting of more than 50 agencies. Our speakers, who I will introduce in a second, will give you the highlights of the 2024 report. So our speakers today all come from the SDG monitoring section of the UN Statistics Division. So we have with us Yongyi, who is the chief of the section and is responsible for the program of the global monitoring and monitoring of the progress towards the SDGs. She's also the lead author of the annual global SDG report. And then we have with us Heather, Daniel, and Panya, who are all statisticians in the same section. Heather, before coming to UNSD, worked previously as an environmental affairs officer at the UN Economic Commission for Latin America, ECLAC. Daniel was working before coming to UNSD at the UN Department of Field Support and the UN Economic Commission for Africa. And Panya was also serving at the Economic Commission for Africa before coming to the UN Statistics Division. So we will now first hear the presentations before we will have a Q&A session at the end. During the presentation, you can write your comments and questions into the meeting chat at any time. And then during the Q&A session, it would be great if you could ask your questions yourself. As always, this Global Network webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the Global Network of Data Officers and Statisticians at yammer.com/UNstats. So if you haven't joined the network yet, we invite you to follow the link in the chat, which I will put there in a second, and to sign up. And now I would like to hand over to Yongyi. Please go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alex, for the nice introductions. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. As Alex mentioned, my name is Yongyi Min. I'm the chief of SDG monitoring section. So thank you very much for joining today's webinar on the SDG report 2024. In this presentation, I was wondering who can share. Yeah, thanks, Heather. In this webinar, we will cover a couple of issues. First, we will talk about quickly, I think for the colleagues who are not familiar with the SDG report process, we'll cover briefly how we prepare the SDG annual report. Then my colleague Heather will brief everyone on the key finding from the SDG report 2024. And then we have one chapter in the report, which we call the data chapter or data stories. Then we will have a little focus on the data chapter data story from the report. And then my colleague Panya will talk about the SDG progress assessment, and which it used to be a separate output with the SDG progress chart. Now we incorporated the SDG progress chart into the annual SDG report. So we also will talk about the other SDG output, such as the extended SDG report, the SDG gender snapshot. And lastly, I would like to seek your suggestion and feedbacks on how we can improve the SDG report. So maybe let me first introduce you about the SDG report processing. Next slide, please, Heather. Thank you. So the progress of the 2030 agenda is mandated to be followed up and reviewed by a set of the global level indicators. So this global SD indicators was developed by the interagency and expert group on SD indicators, which composed of 28 member states. And the first set of the global SDG indicator framework was adopted by the General Assembly in July 2017. And the global indicator framework has gone through 2 rounds commercial review. One is in 2020, which is the current set indicator, contain 231 unique indicators, addressing each of and every single of the goals and target of the 2030 agenda. And we just went through the 2025 comparison review, which are going to be proposed to the UN Statistical Commission in 2025 for its endorsement and adoption. So this annual report is prepared by UN Statistical Division in collaboration with more than 50 international and regional organizations, and is an important input for the high-level political forum, and also the other SDG related events such as the SDG summit and other high-level UN conference. So here is the quick review of how the data flow from country level to the global level, and what's the main different role in the global SDG reporting. First, the data is from the country, and it's collect data according to the fundamental principle of official statistics by the line ministry of the different countries, and also ideally coordinated by the National Statistical Office. So they provide the data and metadata and to the international agency who has a mandate for the global reporting. And the international agency then provided the international comparative data in the different statistical domains. They calculated the global and regional aggregates when there's a need adjustments or estimate data, and they normally send back to the country for validations. And then they provided this comparable country data and alongside with regional and global data and metadata to the UN Statistical Commission for the global SDG indicator database. So UN Statistical Division is responsible for the global indicator database. They make available the international comparable country data on each of the indicator alongside the regional global aggregates. And this fulfills the need for full transparency and allow data user, including the member state, to easily access all data on the SDGs in one place and together with the respective metadata. The timeline for the report, so we to ensure the timeliness of the report, so we normally request the submission for data from mid-February to early March. So we collected the data from the custodian agency, and also at the beginning of March, we also invited the custodian agency to submit the storylines. In April, the data will prepare this Secretary General's progress report, which we call the parliamentary report, which is official report for the high-level political forum. And in April, and then from May to June, the team will focus on preparations this which we call the glossy version of the report and the progress chart. And the report normally is launched at the HLPF or right before the high-level political forums at the end of June or the beginning of July. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So maybe a quick introduction what this report is about. Just want to emphasize the Sustainable Development Goals report as the only official UN report that monitor global and regional progress on the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. It uses latest available data and estimates. So this report provided a very comprehensive review of assessment of the 2030 agenda because it's covered all 17 goals. As we mentioned, basically the report is the global statistical effort in collaboration of the global statistical system from the international agency, international and regional agency, and also based on the data from countries. Let me give you a quick overview of some of the key findings, the overall message from the 2024 report, and then I'll pass over to my colleague Heather. So the key finding is that the world is facing intensifying and interconnected challenges, including the scarring effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, the escalating conflicts, geopolitical tension, and the growing climate chaos. So they are hitting the progress really hard. So the report reveals only 17% of the SDG targets are currently on track, with nearly half showing minimal or moderate progress, and over 1/3 have either stalled progress or even witnessed regressing. So with that, I'll pass to Heather to share some of the details finding from the report. Over to you, Heather.
Thank you so much, Yongyi. So continuing on regarding the key findings. So in the launch of the report in late June, the Secretary General noted that the world is getting a failing grade on the promise of the 2030 agenda. And looking at the goals that were under review at the HLPF this past July, for instance, we see that in Goal 1, an additional 23 million people were pushed into extreme poverty in 2022 compared to 2019. Over 100 million more were suffering from hunger in 2022 compared to 2019. Fossil fuel subsidies reached a historic high of 1.5 trillion in 2022. The number of forcibly displaced persons rose to 120 million, 50% more than 4 years ago and almost double the level of 2015. And developing countries face a $4 trillion annual financing gap to achieve the SDGs. So shrinking fiscal space has also curbed countries' capacity to address these shortfalls, while ODA hit another new high of 223.7 billion in 2023. Foreign direct investments to developing countries actually fell by 7%. And debt levels, as mentioned, remain unprecedentedly high, with this annual SDG investment gap standing at $4 trillion. And in addition, we are failing to protect our planet. Despite some reductions in emissions in developed countries, greenhouse gas concentrations hit record highs in 2022 and continue to rise in 2023 as well. We're also seeing the same trend in 2024. Carbon dioxide levels are 150% above pre-industrial levels. Public funding for fossil fuels doubled from 2021 to 2022 and have tripled since 2015. Ocean acidification and species extinction risk are worsening, with a 12% decline in the red list index since 1993. And 2024 is looking to be even warmer than 2023. In essence, all of these trends are actually headed in the opposite direction of where we'd like them to go. So violence and armed conflicts have also become an increasing threat to our sustainable development efforts. Ongoing conflicts and persistent unrest contributed to a record of 120 million forcibly displaced people worldwide by May 2024, with this number continuing to escalate. Civilian casualties in armed conflicts rose by 72% between 2022 and 2023. And these crises really highlight the urgent need for international cooperation to address both longstanding as well as emerging security threats. So essentially, if these current trends continue by 2023, 590 million people may still live in extreme poverty, and fewer than 3 in 10 countries are expected to actually have their national poverty rates. 1 in 5 children under age 5 will be affected by stunting. 110% more fossil fuels will be produced than would be consistent with limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. 2 billion people will live without safely managed drinking water, 3 billion without safely managed sanitation, and 1.4 billion without basic hygiene services. In addition, 660 million people will still lack electricity access, and around 1.8 billion will go without clean cooking fuels and technologies. So if we don't want this failing report card to be our future, we must accelerate action to redefine the trajectory of SDG progress. And we actually can turn things around because SDG progress is already happening. There are successful, despite the trends that I was just describing, there are actually successful examples of SDG progress that need to be accelerated and ramped up, and such as Central and Southern Asia reduced working poverty by 46% between 2015 and 2030. And 134 countries have already met the reducing child mortality target, and 7 more were on track in 2022. Gender parity in managerial roles in sub-Saharan Africa have improved more than 40% since 2000. Global unemployment hit a historic low of 5% in 2023. The 100 billion annual climate finance commitment to developing countries was met for the first time in 2022. And marine protected area coverage has increased more than tenfold between 2000 and 2024. So with accelerated action building on these successes and others, we can actually reverse our failing grade. But we are certainly at a critical moment of choice and consequence, where urgent priorities are abundantly clear. The world needs peace. Resolving ongoing conflicts through dialogue and diplomacy is essential. We also need action on finance. Developing countries require more financial resources and fiscal space. Reforming the global financial architecture is crucial to unlocking the volume of financing required to spur sustainable development actions at scale that is needed. And also advancing the 500 billion stimulus per year is really critical to accelerate that progress. In addition, we need a surge in implementation. There needs to be massive investment in effective partnerships in order to drive these critical transitions in food, energy, social protection, digital connectivity, and more. In particular, a lot of the topics that were discussed at the Summit of the Future. In essence, the SDGs are the best pathway out of our global challenges, and we really must seize this opportunity. So these are kind of going more in depth into the key findings in the report. And as Yongyi mentioned, the report also includes a focus on data. Generally, we call this our data story. And in this past report in 2024, we noted that despite the challenges in SDG progress, there has been actual considerable progress achieved in the availability of internationally comparable data. And so the number of indicators included in the global SDG database has increased from 115 in 2016 to 229 in 2024. And the number of data records in the database has steadily increased from 330,000 in 2016 to over 2.9 million in September 2024. However, SDG progress assessment is affected by ongoing challenges in the availability and timeliness of data to monitor all 17 goals. And so while we do have overall commendable progress across the agenda and across the 17 goals, and we have good trend data available for 51% of the indicators, there is a variance in country data coverage, and this plays out differently across the goals, where we do see shortfalls in priority development areas, in particular in Goal 5 on gender equality, Goal 13 on climate action, where many of those indicators are also at global level, and also peace, justice, and strong institutions. So persistent areas of concern also in those data gaps, kind of drilling down a little bit more, are on geographic coverage, timeliness, as well as disaggregation. So approximately 1/3 of the indicators lack data for the past 3 years, hampering the ability of policymakers to really make timely, informed decisions and course corrections. We do actually update and review the timeliness and the availability of indicators a couple times a year. So we would also have an update on this for the next round. So countries worldwide are recognizing the need to invest in national statistical systems in order to produce high quality, timely data for SDG monitoring. And so this involves not only financial resources, but requires building capacity, modernizing infrastructure, and also adopting international statistical standards. And as countries are strengthening their statistical foundations, they're also embracing innovation and integrating diverse data sources and methodologies, which is also really critical to overcoming declining response rates, as well as fostering collaborative partnerships. And so part of the innovative data sources and integration of different data sources we're seeing across countries are also in some of the indicators for the SDGs. So for instance, Azerbaijan has used remote sensing to monitor the coverage of important sites for mountain biodiversity. Colombia and Malaysia have integrated geospatial data to estimate the proportion of rural population. Bangladesh has employed geospatial and survey data for local poverty estimates. Ghana and the UK have also tapped into citizen-generated data to monitor marine litter, and Netherlands and Uruguay are also monitoring air pollution networks via sensors. And so we're really seeing a lot of different examples of not only innovation, but also the integration of different data sources in countries to monitor the SDGs and overcome some of those data gaps. And we're also seeing that engaging citizens in this data production is really essential to leave no one behind, not only just to fill data gaps, but also to have the active involvement of citizen data to support that community firsthand knowledge to really address those needs, because that's really the point behind the SDGs, is that we're really bringing that down to the local level. And so involving citizens in that data production can really shift towards a more collaborative and participatory model of governance. And so I think this is my last slide. And so essentially kind of the main message of this data section is that investing in better data is really key to supporting a rescue plan for people on the planet. Data and data innovation has to be part and parcel to that full rescue plan, in addition to all of the other areas of concern. So I will pass now to Panya, who is going to describe the SDG progress assessment and process. Thank you so much.
Many thanks, Heather, for briefing us on the overall findings of the report. Hello, everybody. It's an extra pleasure to be a speaker today. In addition to mostly moderating these global network webinars, I'm going to spend a few minutes to bring you through what we did to the progress assessment in this year's report. So as Yongyi already mentioned at the top of this presentation, for the first time, we have now included the progress assessment into the glossy report itself. In the past, we usually produced a supplementary document that we only upload online. But this year, actually, the progress assessment is an integral part of the whole report. Next slide, please. Heather mentioned that the Secretary General pointed out that the SDG report is an annual report card for the world on the SDG. And as all of us who have gone through school know, every report card will need some sort of grading criteria. So the methodology that we have developed for the progress assessment is that grading criteria. There are indeed a number of different progress assessment methodologies that we can choose or measures that we could choose. But after some deliberation, we have decided that probably the clearest and most effective way of communicating progress towards achieving the SDG is to use the trend to target measure. And basically it answers the question of how likely are we to meet the SDG targets by 2030, given the rate of progress from baseline to date. So think of the SDG a little bit as, to use a sport analogy, as running a marathon with a time goal. So we have the baseline, which is the values of the indicators in 2015. We have the target, which is the 2030 values for the indicators. And then we have a time goal. In the case of the SDG, it's 15 years from 2015 to 2030. So what this trend to target tells us is if we know how fast we have run to now, how likely are we to actually reach the end, the goal, the finish line by 2030? And we answer that question by providing 5 different trends that we basically include in the trend assessments. On track or target met means that the target has already been achieved by now or is on track to be achieved, given the rate of progress so far. Moderate progress says that to date there has been some progress towards the target, but acceleration is needed to achieve the target by 2030. Marginal progress means that there has only been some progress, marginal progress towards the target, and significant acceleration is needed. Stagnation, as the name suggests, says that there has not been progress, or there has been very little progress from the baseline, and the target is unlikely to be achieved. And regression suggests that to date, the target has actually worsened from the baseline of 2015. Next slide, please. Before we show the methodology itself, it's also worth mentioning that there was a lot of effort to make sure that we include the right data and the right indicators in the assessment. And that is borne out from the fact that the global indicator framework is actually a huge universe of statistical data that we have to deal with. So the picture on the right tells you just how complex the global indicator framework can be. The goals themselves are pretty straightforward, 17 sustainable development goals, but those goals are then basically separated into 169 targets, which then goes into 231 indicators, and in many have their own multiple data series, which subsequently then have their disaggregation dimensions. So as a result, actually, the United Nations Statistics Divisions are currently reporting more than 3,000 statistical variables in our SDG database. So the first thing that we do with the assessment is to actually decide which data series are included in the assessment. And we use 3 criteria to make that decision. The first criteria is that the data series have to best represent the reference population. So in this case, we want to make sure that because this is a global assessment, we want to look at overall progress for the indicators. Secondly, the wordings of the data series should be closest to that of the SDG targets. Each targets have multiple indicators and data series. In this case, we only select those that basically agree in both letters and spirits to the targets themselves. And last but not least, we only choose data series that will enable us to make comparison over time. So just to take one example, there are certain data series that report absolute numbers. We try to avoid those data series because absolute numbers sometimes lack nuances because basically the world gets bigger, the global population gets larger. So we look at indicators that have, for example, a percentage or a certain data series per 100,000 population and things like that, which allow us to more effectively make comparison over time. Next slide, please. So once that pre-assessment is done, the methodologies to assess progress is itself relatively straightforward, at least mathematically, right? So step one is to assign a trend to the data series in the global indicator framework. So we think of data series in two ways. There are those data series that have explicit 2030 target values, and there are those that don't have those values. So we treat them a little bit differently. For the data series with the target values, we first calculate the compound annual growth rate by the formula that you see on the screen. There's a bit of a typo. Secondly, we basically use that compound annual growth rate to extrapolate expected 2030 value. So think back to my analogy of running a marathon with a time goal. The first step is to actually calculate your pace so far. Let's say we're at the midpoint now. How fast have you been running from the start line to now? And the second step is to basically use that pace to then extrapolate the distance that we will have covered by the end of the race, right? And once we have those, we assign a trend based on the value that you see in the first column of the table. So this basically talks about by 2030, if we keep to the current rate of progress that we have achieved to date, how much of the gap between baseline and 2030 target will we have closed by that date? So if the answer is more than 95%, we give the trend of on track or on target. If it's between 50% and 95%, we say moderate progress, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. And for those series that do not have explicit 2030 target values, we basically still calculate the compound annual growth rate, but then we assign the trend based solely on how fast progress has been since baseline. And we basically assign those values based on the CAGR value itself. Next slide, please. So in the first step, we assign trend names to different data series. But in the second step, we actually use an algorithm to linearly rescale those trend names inwards into a numerical score on a continuous range from 0 to 5. What this step does to simplify things is to make sure that we do not treat all data series with the same trend name equally. I mean, if something is categorized as having moderate progress, it doesn't mean that the pace of change has been equally fast, right? So this step of rescaling everything into a continuous range from 0 to 5 is to make sure that there is still a nuance or a differentiating factor within the same trend band. So 0 basically in this case means there has been absolutely no progress at all, and 5 means there has been progress that will allow the target to reach the 2030 goal. And basically in this case, instead of having 5 discrete trends, we actually allow different data series to have different continuous numerical values. And in step 3, we bring everything back together by aggregating. If you think about the graphic that I show on the second slide of going from goal to indicator to data series. Now we work backwards, right? So basically, we aggregate the score for the data series into indicators, and then we aggregate the score for the indicators into targets. And then based on that calculation, we assign a trend, now again invert to certain targets, right? To as many of the 169 targets as we can. Next slide, please. The result looks something like this. I mean, in the raw data, right? So for each of the target, we give a numerical value as well as a trend name. And then next slide, please. This is how we show the progress assessment in the SDG report this year. So for each goal, we list down the targets under that goal. And for each of the target, you will see a traffic light color next to it, which tells you whether it's on track or it has made moderate progress, marginal progress, whether it has stagnated or regressed. So again, this is now a part of the main report. It's in the last two basically substantive pages of the report. So it allows readers to, at a quick glance, actually have a pretty good idea of where we stand right now in terms of the probability of reaching the SDGs by 2030, and the technical note that explains in details all the 3 steps that I have briefly kind of presented today is also available online on the report's website. And this is it for the progress assessment. Would be happy to answer any questions you have at the end during the Q&A. And I want to now pass on to my colleague Daniel to talk about other outputs that we have produced on top of this SDG report. On to you, Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you, Panya, for taking us through this. I would be focusing on other output that we have supporting the data exploration. So I'll go through a few slides to introduce those ones. We have, as Yongyi and mentioned initially, the SDG report contains resources and input from more than 50 UN agencies, and these come in what we call data stories to be submitted to the final SDG report, but not all of them will make the cut to the SDG report. But these reports are presented in what we call the SDG extended report. So you can see the raw inputs from agencies with all the data stories that were suggested, but might not be included in the report. So there is more to the SDG report than the actual glossy report you see at the end. So these additional resources are compiled and presented in what we call the SDG extended report, which contains all the data stories, which contains all the original data summaries, charts, tables that were part of the SDG report. This kind of gives people who are interested to explore more, to go deep dive into the data and the findings. It'll be a good resource to go through the original submissions. And then we compile this every year. And also, as you see the link here, we present it in our website. The other major input for the SDG report is a global indicator database, which has just been the main source of data for presenting our findings on the SDG report. Currently, we have, as Heather was showing in her slide, about 229 SDG indicators with data. So the total of 200 out of the total of 231. We are missing 2 indicators, which we hope would be coming in the coming years. So this is, a great achievement in terms of the data collection process, which is now about 2.9 million data records. This is something that has been growing since 2016. These 2.9 million data records represent the 229 indicators. These indicators are subdivided into 693 data series as of now. So there's a lot of data there for people who want to look into a particular indicator or a particular series to do some serious trend analysis or additional investigation on the reporting. The other key component we disseminate is what we have is a metadata repository. So if you want to know how the indicator is calculated, what computation is used, what are the sources who are providing the data, and things like that. That's where you find the details. So we have a metadata repository that gives you the metadata in a standard template, but we also have this now integrated in the global database in machine readable format. So if somebody is interested in dissecting, getting the metadata through APIs, that is now possible. So as you get the data through APIs, you can also get the metadata through API using SDMX template. Another key component in this indicator database is the country profiles, where you can see the progress by country, not only the global ones. So if you're interested in a specific country or region, you get some data set compiled to that specific area, where it gives you a highlight of what's happening across the goals. Next to that, we have what we call advanced analytics. This is where you could do some more analysis in terms of comparability of data, in terms of looking at trends. We also have a very good chart that shows data availability across goals, across countries or regions. So this is where you want to spend more time looking into the data, dissecting it a bit to find some sense in terms of the data or availability, analytics, trends, comparability. The other output we have is what was mentioned earlier, was this SDG gender snapshot. This is a collaboration effort with UN Women. The latest edition is the sixth edition, which was launched back in September in the around the Summit of the Future. This focuses mainly on the gender perspective across all the 17 goals. So using the same data we have, baseline data, and putting a gender lens on it, and then providing some input insights out of it, out of the data, which to no surprise, there are some areas where we're lacking in terms of advancing gender disparities, in some areas where we're doing well. So if you're interested in looking at gender snapshot, please visit this website. We have the report in 3 languages, English, French, and Spanish. The latest was published last September around the feature of the Summit of the Future. Another area where we've been working since the SDG Summit is an innovative way of exploring the data. This is our engagement with Google in Google Data Commons, who have been working with us in exploring the SDG database further. As Panya was showcasing how the indicator series are being subdivided, but now if we're also having to go deeper, one level down than the series, to group the data into statistical variables, where you can look into trends of more than like 3,000 of them, that you can explore areas. These gives you the progress in across the goals, but in a very consumable formats where you are dissecting it further down the series. And then you can get some reports by country, by goal area. And one of the key highlights of this tool is you can do natural language query on the data, which kind of leads your way of discovering and exploring the data sets. One additional thing we did is since last year, we have also started integrating the data stories into this tool. So the SDG report data stories are part of the tool where it gives you insight of what you're looking into. So you can take a look at this website. I'll just do a quick recorded demo so you can see what I mean after this. Right now, in advancing the work in this area, this is part of a larger project with UN Data, and we're also trying to integrate more data sets into this tool. Apart from the SDGs, we have ILO, UNICEF, WHO, and UNODC data being integrated. We already have WHO, I think, published, so ILO is online to be published. You will get more areas to discover apart from SDGs in some thematic areas. We have defined about 12 thematic areas across the UN to let users explore it more. There is more work happening in terms of refining the user experience based on the SDGs. There's continuous work in the next 2 years. There will be more work in this tool in advancing its use. Just to give you a highlight of what it looks like here, you can just simply go to Google and type UN data comments for the SDGs, and this will be one of the top hits. And then if you go through the SDGs page, this is where you explore the SDGs data in a different light than the usual, the traditional way we have. We have data test exploration by country. In this case, is Colombia. So you get all the charts and different formats to see the trends in Colombia across the goals. You can switch from one goal to another. The other thing is you can also explore it by the goals. I was mentioning earlier that the report has been integrated. So you see these key messages are part of the report, and the data stories are part of the report and part of this online tool to explore further. The third way, which I was mentioning about the natural language query, is where you can type user-specific queries. So you can do natural queries where you get results out of it. So here is looking for food wastage. Then you see all the data by different types. Here the maps are also time sensitive, so you can explore by year. Another example, if you want to go further, dissect it. So here we're asking a question about gender-specific roles in Colombia. Then it gives you data related to that, and you can explore, download the data of that specific chart, or see the resources where it's coming from. You see the sources from the global SDG database here. The other interesting thing is this is context sensitive, so it remembers what you've asked. Here we're typing, we just compare Colombia, Brazil, and Ecuador. It knows that your question was about gender-related representation, and it brings the comparison across the three. As I mentioned earlier, we have data partners which are part of this process, the initial tranche. WHO, ILO, UNICEF, and the like. This is growing as we go, so there's more work of integrating more data sets from more UN agencies. But I would like you to go to this website and explore yourself. This is something that is really user-driven. And the question you ask is how you get your answers. So Without further ado, this is the report, and just a teaser of what additional informations are available, tools are available for you to explore. I'll pass it to Yongyi for the last slide for comments and suggestions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, Daniel. So the last, we would like to seek your feedbacks and also suggestion. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yes, we'd like to seek your suggestion on the report because 2025 will be our 10th version of the report, and also it will be 5 years from the deadline of the 2030. So we really want to seek how from the different point of view. And this is if you have any suggestion, if you don't have time, you can also send it to us using the statistic hotline email address. So basically, we would like to seek the content and relevance of the report. How well does the annual SDG report address the most critical trends, challenges, and progress related to the SDG? So any other key topic issue that we should be include in the 2025 version of the report? The clearance and the presentation of the report is the information in the report presented in a clear, concise, and accessible manner. So any suggestion on the data visualization or storyline taking that can be improved or better understanding. And also the usefulness of this report. How useful is this report for your work or decision making or other advocacy effort? And any other specific tools, case study, or examples that could increase its practical value? And lastly, we would like to say what specific improvement would you like to suggest for the next edition of the report? So with that, thank you very much. I'll pass it over to Alex.
Thanks, Yongyi, Heather, Daniel, Panya. Thanks for this presentation. Really insightful. There's a wealth of data there that is now waiting to be explored by all of you. And I would like now to, well, we still have like 5-6 minutes to see if there are any questions. So if you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand, and we will now also activate the cameras and microphones. So I think Heather was sharing the screen, so you have an overlay there, so we don't see the slide. Just wanted to let you know. Thanks. So who wants to ask a question, please raise your hand. There was also some discussion going on regarding the target values. I'm not sure if we want to go there maybe first, just to talk about this. Panya, so there was a question about the target values for 20, so for the progress charts, so the target values for 2030 and how this is calculated and where you can find that information. Maybe we go there first.
Let me say very quickly, maybe in 30 seconds to clarify, because there must be a lot of similar questions on this. So the question is from Rabir about what the 2030 target values we use for the assessment. My answer to this is we basically take the 2030 targets directly from the wording of the SDG targets itself. If the target mentions eliminating something, then we set the 2030 target as 0. If it mentions halving something, then we cut the baseline number by half. And if it says universal access to something, hand wash facilities and so on, we set the targets to 100. We do understand that different methodologies may use different target values, and the suggestion of potentially having transparency of what target values we use in our assessment is a good one. And we will study it carefully and consider whether we should do that in future editions of our report. Thanks.
Thank you, Panya, for this clarification. And then I see Habib has his hand up. So Habib, if you want to come in.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for this presentation. It was very, very interesting, very informative. Unfortunately, I missed the first 20 minutes, so I cannot ask a question to that. My question is to Panya. You meant, so the work that you have done on tracking the SDG, excellent work. And you mentioned that you used only the relative indicators, not the absolute ones, which is the right way to go. I was wondering whether you also looked at the how can I say, the compliance to methodology for those indicators. Because I mean, I know that for some of the indicators, there are very sound international methodology, which all countries follow. So they're adequately harmonized, the methodology. Is it true for all? I mean, did you check whether it's true for all indicators? Because sometimes, like I've seen very wild differences in how countries define a particular thing. No, for example, during the COVID pandemic, we did some work with countries, right? And the death by COVID was defined very differently by across countries. Could that be also the case, for example, for damages or missing persons due to disaster, which is an indicator in SDGs? Thank you.
Thanks, Habib. Maybe we take 2 or 3 questions just to gain a little bit of time. I see also the hand up of Lorenza. Lorenza, if you would like to come in, please go ahead.
Yes, also from my side, thank you for these presentations. I thought they were very informative. I will not be speaking to the questions that were asked regarding the report, but asking more of a general question. So the data officer is not on this meeting. He could definitely speak more in depth to the topic, but we in Serbia have been taking a leading role as the RCO in supporting the National Statistical Office in strengthening SDG reporting. And as a result, the number of SDG indicators that are monitored increased like more than threefold, like from 43 in 2017 to 149 in 2024. But we are still facing specific challenges, and we'd like to invite other colleagues or perhaps yourselves to support us in identifying best practice. How, for example, can we leverage support for mix, as that is such an important way of collecting data for groups at risk of being left behind? And also, what best practice do you have on how to capture a screenshot of SDG progress for our CCA report? Because we're asked to present our SDG progress in a way that is compelling and compact, and we'd like to also know what best practices are there around other countries. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorenza, and I'll hand over directly also to Sean for a question, and then we go to the answers. Yes.
Thanks, guys. I had one question I don't know the answer to. I just was genuinely curious if people thought about this. I mean, I was thinking about, one thing that stood out to me is kind of this dramatic lack of progress. And I was just curious if there's been any discussion about sort of like what I would call questioning the setup, so to speak, zooming out and trying to think about the paradigm we're using and how it might accentuate certain kinds of failure that are sort of like incidental to the measurement framework or the nature of the goals. For instance, like looking at poverty. I mean, to be fair, we won't meet the poverty goal of eliminating poverty, but at the same time, the failure stands out not because of, in one sense, the lack of reduction in poverty, but because we failed to reach a zero value. which seems to be an artifact of a sort of a very ambitious measurement paradigm. And there's been some thinking around this in terms of to what extent that our very measurement of certain phenomenon can actually change our focus and understanding in order to sort of minimize the actions we take where they're most measurable to human societies and kind of reorganize them around actions that sort of help us achieve certain goals and targets. So I just wanted to see if there's been any talk about sort of like how this sort of thing can be mitigated going forward in the next, or to what extent this is a problem at all. There has been some literature out there on this that I've been following, and I just wanted to know if this is an interesting question that you'd want to jump into. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Sean. So I hand over now to our speakers to answer those questions. I'm not sure who wants to go first. Yongyi or Panya, whoever.
Panya, maybe want to answer the question Habib raised first.
Yeah, I'll take Habib's question directly, and I'll answer the second part of Sean's question about the goal. So Habib, to answer your question on the consistency and quality control of data for different indicators and data series, at UNSD, we take the data as given to us by the custodian agencies. As you may well understand, we are not an expert on all areas of the Sustainable Development Goals, but that's why we work with 50 international and regional organizations who are experts in those areas. And as Yongyi showed in maybe the first couple of slides, the reporting framework has a very rigorous quality control kind of aspect to it, where the custodian agencies are able to take the data from the 193 member states and make sure that they are comparably, internationally comparable, and that they meet certain standards. Your example of morbidity and fatality, related to COVID, for example, the WHO will have a very rigorous definition of how that is defined. And when the WHO submits that data to us, we use that data. So even though we don't do it directly in terms of quality control, the custodian agencies are already doing that in making sure that we're not comparing apples with oranges. Sean's second part of the question about setting zero value and whether that is realistic. No, I don't think it is. But actually, in the methodology, we do have kind of allowance built into it. If you look at our on track or target achieved, we're not saying you have to meet the target 100% for this indicator to be classified as on track. If you have achieved 95% of it, if you are close enough to the target, then you are classified as on track. We do know that these are more fundamentally kind of a human experience question and almost a philosophical question whether we can ever reach zero in terms of extreme poverty, but mathematically we do allow for a little bit of slack, right? You don't have to really reach 100% to be on track. I'll pass it on to other colleagues to answer other questions. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe let me try to address some of the questions relate to, for example, Sean's mentioned. I think at the very beginning of the 2030 agenda, people mentioned this is aspirational goals and target. So it's probably not realistic. And one issue is also like, I think when they set up the goals and target, my feeling is a lot of the input from the statistical community has not been taken into considerations. So we're basically coming later into the game. That's one issue, and so the indicator process or the monitoring process is not only a technical process, it's both political and technical process. So when we design the indicators, we're bounded by all this political agreed goals and target. So even we have a little bit of wiggle room, as Panya mentioned, for reduce eradicate poverty. We don't treat it as absolute zero. Maybe we treat I think as a World Bank as a 3% with a realistic eradicate rate, but still we have a lot of like a limitation in terms of how much flexibility we can have. So hopefully in the next round, when the politicians set up the global development agenda, that will really suggest that the view from the technical side can also be incorporated. I think the lesson learned and from the SDG process will be a really good value added to the whatever the upcoming the development agenda after 2030. Regarding the capacity buildings issues, help country. So first, I'd like to congratulate your great effort to help the country to increase a lot of the data coverage. So in the coming years, the group, the interagency and expert group on SDG indicators will also focus some of this issue. So we will work with the custodian agency, try to see if we can help country to build capacity to increase the data coverage, particularly for some of the very challenging, which we call the low data coverage indicators. Through different means, and so we already have some capacity building program within the division itself. For example, we have this data for now capacity building initiative that we help country to establish some capacity for their identified priority indicator that they do not have the capacity. But I know that different agency also has a different capacity building program. So maybe the for the next few years, so that we can try to work together with the agency and the country to provide these resources and best practice on how to increase data coverage. We do have a wiki page we didn't mention here today, and we collect the best practice on different area related to SDG monitors on our website. So maybe there's already some lesson from other countries that can be applied. Maybe other want to come in?
Just had one quick thing to say about Sean's question, which we actually get some variation of that question quite a lot. You know, is this agenda too ambitious? Is this should we change? Should this all be changed? Essentially, I think there's a lot of value though, and in the framework and in the entire SDGs in general, because I mean we strive for ambitious targets. If we set them low, you know, if we only go for the low-hanging fruit, like politically, like globally, as a global community, we will just go for the low-hanging fruit. We will not aim past that. And so I think that the SDGs have actually done a really great job of galvanizing an entire global community to aim higher. And so I think that that's something else to also keep in mind. Thanks.
Thank you. So we are already a little bit of time, so I would like to close now the Q&A session. But before I let everyone go, I just wanted to say that thanks to everyone, to all the speakers, and thank you also to all the participants in this global network webinar and in the global network of data officers and statisticians in general. So this community has grown to more than 3,100 members. During the past year, we organized 14 webinars for you on different topics with more than 1,400 participants in total. So thank you all for being part of this. And we will now go on our usual break for the holiday season, and we'll return in the second half of January with a talk on AI and storytelling. So thanks again to everyone, and happy holidays. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone, and see you in January.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
See ya.
Happy holidays. Thanks so much.